Well, I'm here with Matt Bird. I've known Matt for many years, lots and lots of years, on and off over those years. And Matt was the founder of the Cinnamon Network, who some of you may have known. If you don't know it, then don't look for it because it's now called NAYBA. But it comes alongside churches and helps them to connect into community, something that on this channel we are passionate about. So welcome, Matt, and it's great to have you with us. Just give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch of who you are for those that don't know you.
Oh my goodness, thumbnail sketch. Well, you know, well, my educational credentials are I left school believing I was stupid because that's what my teachers told me I was. In my 20s, discovered I was dyslexic, wrestled with the stigma of that and that graduation present for most of my teachers. And, and over the years, reframed that. And actually, I see my dyslexia and ADHD actually as my advantage in life, not my disadvantage. It's not a design flaw. It's my design. It's by design, So I've embraced, that part of who I am as my superpower. I live between central London. I love the vibe of Covent Garden and the energy and the life. But I also have a little home in Sicily, the biggest island in the Mediterranean off the boot of Italy. And I love being there. I'm learning Italian. I write a travel blog about the island every weekend, and I've written a travel guide, and I love that. And work-wise, yeah, I'll do some work as well.
Occasionally.
Okay, so I'm the founder of NAYBA, which helps churches around the world to better love their neighbours and transform their neighbourhoods. And I'm also the CEO of Publish You, and we coach more than 100 people a year to write, publish, and market books, their books worldwide. So I love NAYBA and I love Publish You. I love the way we can help churches. And I love the way I can help individuals write their book, tell their story, communicate their message.
Fantastic. I mean, that's just such a brilliant introduction, to be honest with you, because I've always thought of you as a bit of a Renaissance man, really. You tend to, when you turn your hand to something, you apply yourself to it absolutely 100%. And over the years, one of the things that I've learned about you and respected, admired, really, is your incredible ability to network with people, to build relationships across divides and things like that. And it's been an absolute joy to watch that over the years. And in a way, it's in some ways NAYBA, and that is what qualifies you really to talk about the subject this morning, because we're talking about future church. And how does the church have to become in the next 10 years? And quite honestly, how do we get there? And you work with churches across the world, so you have a unique insight and a unique perspective on this. So tell us, give us your vision for the church in 10 years' time. How do you see it panning out?
Every neighbor loved.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. Go on, tease that out, unpack that. What does that look like?
Well, Jesus was asked what really matters. What's the most
Yeah.
important stuff? Because there's loads of stuff in there, Christian religious Bible stuff out there. What really matters? Jesus was asked, and he said, "Love God, love your neighbor." You know, and I think most of the church worldwide is quite good at loving God, but much of the church finds it a bit more difficult to love our neighbor, and so our vision as NAYBA. Incidentally, it's spelled NAYBA because we didn't want to get caught between the American and the European spelling of neighbour.
So you spelt
So,
it wrong. You did it the dyslexic style.
in fact, I would love to say that's true, but it's actually the correct way of spelling neighbour in Belize Creole. So in the Belize
Okay.
Creole Bible in South America, it's spelled NAYBA. So we're
Okay.
neighbour.org. So
Right. Wow.
anyway, so back to the question.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing that the church is growing in every day, we're all growing in every day, is loving God and loving our neighbour. And so
Yeah.
NAYBA, the global charity I founded, is focused on the second aspect of that particularly, to help churches better love, because they're already loving their neighbours. We can't say that because they
No,
are,
it's
but
true. Yeah, it is true.
to
Yeah,
better
absolutely.
love their neighbours. And that's my vision for the future church. And there's lots of good reasons for that, Richard. Obviously Jesus asked us to, But in terms of missional strategy, it's really important because we're growing up in a world where there are high levels of distrust.
Yes.
High levels of distrust in institutions, whether it be the church or politics or the media or banking. I mean, you name it. Some of these big historical institutions have taken a battering.
Yeah.
You know, and
And
we
sometimes rightly so. I mean,
absolutely,
I was talking to somebody a
totally.
couple of weeks ago, about the church and future church, and they were saying, that they feel that persecution is coming in the West. And I said, yeah, but let's be persecuted for the right reasons, because so often we have been persecuted because we've been stupid and we've been crass and we have not loved our neighbours and we
Yeah,
have treated people with disrespect. And it strikes me that actually what you're saying is really key, isn't it? It's really key that the love that we show is a genuine, open-hearted, open-handed love
mm.
to people with no strings. It's the unconditional love of God, isn't it?
Absolutely, no strings
Yeah,
attached. So, but the really important thing is that we're thought. So I was talking about missional strategy. So
yes,
yes, we love our neighbor because Jesus asked us to.
yeah,
But in a world of distrust in institutions and in leaders,
yes,
pastors, politicians, journalists, bankers, I mean, the level of trust is very low.
yeah.
And so, in a world of this culture of distrust, nobody gives. I need to remember on a Christian podcast interview. Nobody gives
Fill in the
much.
blank.
Yeah, fill in the blank. You fill in the blank how you'd like to fill in the blank, but nobody cares very much about what
No,
you say. I
yeah,
mean, listen to a politician. I know some amazing politicians, but politicians are renowned for saying one thing and doing
yeah,
nothing about
yeah,
it or doing the other. And church leaders are known for other things, and the media is
yeah.
Anyway, I don't you
We
know
get
the
it. We get it.
so in that kind of world, what we say matters little.
Yes,
What we do is everything.
yeah,
Because people don't believe what we say, they believe what we do. And so loving our neighbor is what the church does. And I believe is what the church needs to do more of in this missional context to
yes,
actually be relevant and be heard, because we're not heard by our words,
no,
we're heard by our actions.
yeah,
And the Bible says, faith without action is dead anyway. I mean, it absolutely is. You may have the most coherent, well thought through biblical theology. You may have been to theological college and done this, that, and the other, but it doesn't
no,
matter
no, no, no. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
unless not it doesn't matter unless the people around you feel loved. And
Yeah,
this is the emphasis that NAYBA is putting on what we believe the church needs to lean into at this
yeah.
time as we walk into the future.
And that's really
Not
interesting, isn't it? Because that statement that you just made, people need to feel loved, is really important. And the reason why it's important is that too often I found over the years that churches want to love their neighbor on their terms. They want to do it in a way that is comfortable and convenient to them. And one of the things I find myself balking at really is that kind of love. Because the reality is that if we're going to genuinely get people to believe that they're loved, feel that they're loved, we have to go to their needs, to their situation, and meet them at their point of need. It's about incarnation, isn't it? It's about
yeah,
being
absolutely.
Jesus to them.
Yeah,
Do you agree with that? And how do you encourage that?
absolutely. And that's why I said, when you said, what's your vision for the future church? I answered it in 3 words:
Yes,
every neighbor loved.
yes, yes,
I didn't say every church doing the activity of loving their neighbor.
yes,
We can easily get caught up in activity that we
definitely.
think it is going to make our neighbors feel loved, but is it?
Yes,
So we actually need to be prayerful, thoughtful. We need to hear, understand what people are experiencing, and then address those issues, because then our neighbor will feel loved. And as
yes,
you so rightly said, it's about incarnation. I mean, Professor Leslie Newbigin, my kind of hero missiologist, he said the local church is the hermeneutic of the gospel.
yes,
The local
Yeah.
church translates what the gospel is to its community.
Yeah.
And I just find that a lovely picture. And it's the picture of incarnation.
It is.
The word became flesh and blood and moved, and lived among us, or as the Message translation says, the word
Moved
became
into our
flesh
neighborhood.
and blood and moved into the neighborhood,
Yeah.
coming back to
Brilliant.
neighbor.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And in the Gospel of John, so at the beginning, chapter 1, the word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. That's a picture of the incarnation.
Yes.
And then in chapter 20, Jesus says, as the Father has sent me,
Yeah.
now I'm sending you.
Yeah.
So now you go incarnationally
Yes.
and move into the neighborhood and love your neighbors. And your neighbors include your enemies.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So
Yes, absolutely.
this is the Great Commission. This is the mandate from Jesus to love God
Yes.
and love our neighbor incarnationally, not how we think they need to be loved or how we want to, or following the latest fad. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we all have fads, and the Christian scene has fads. Let's all do this or all do that. But just stop for a moment. Stop and understand, what are the genuine felt needs of your community?
Yeah.
And those needs change.
Yes.
I know a church in Greater London, and in the last few years, with the Hong Kong community moving to the UK, their church is now more than 60% Hong Kongers.
Okay.
So the needs and the demographics of your context can change very, very quickly.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's really important that we review what those needs are and ensure whatever we're doing as the church actually works with other people to serve those needs.
Okay, now let's unpack that a little bit because that's really helpful, really important. And it seems to me that one of the things it means is that every situation and context is going to be unique and different. There may be commonality, there may be things we can learn
Yeah.
from others, but a one-size-fits-all package that you buy, usually from America, is not necessarily going to work and raise thousands of people in your context. It just doesn't work like that.
Absolutely.
And so it strikes me that what you're not proposing is this one size fits all, there's one way to do it, and neither is Jesus. Not that I'm necessarily putting you and Jesus in,
Any proximity. Well,
Oh, no,
I'll
no.
try
Oh,
my
no,
best.
you're in proximity, definitely. But it strikes me that that's really important, isn't it? Because often what we want to do is a cookie cutter mentality. If we do this, then this is going to happen. Put in our thumb and pull out a plum and say, "What a good boy am I?" And yet, actually, if your heart is for your neighborhood, the needs of your neighborhood will be different to the ones possibly even 3/4 of a mile away from your
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
And it's having that ability to engage on a one-to-one, person-by-person, school gate way with those around you and move with the physical differences, the demographic as it changes. I mean, I know in my church that, we have 53 languages within a half a mile of the building. And when I first arrived, we had 2 languages in the building. There was a disconnect
Yes.
between the community and the church. Now we have something like 22 languages. We've got a long way to go, but it's a good litmus as to how engaged you actually are. Unpack that a bit for me, Matt. Unpack that
Sure.
in terms of what
Yeah.
NAYBA does to help with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So we help local churches on a guided journey.
Okay.
And there are 3 steps in the journey. And the
Yes.
middle step, I'll jump straight there, is called the neighbour pathway. And the neighbour pathway helps churches discern what the needs are of their community and what Jesus might be asking them to do about it. And 5 C's. This is all online, by the way.
Yeah.
But 5 C's. Firstly, community. What are the resources and assets of your community, and what are its needs and pain points? Step 1. Step 2, what civic, C for civic, what civic provision is being made? What is the local government and statutory authorities doing to meet those needs? And where are they? What are the undermet needs or the unmet needs that exist? And so that's the really important second step. The third step is to then ask corporate, what corporate businesses, what do they have as their priorities? What are their social responsibilities? Because again, they're making a significant contribution. And then fourthly, church. So community, civic, corporate, church. what resources does your church have? What are you passionate about? Do you have a building? What physical resources do you have? And what skills do you have? And then fifthly, the fifth C is calling. Therefore, based upon the needs of the and assets of the community, what civic provision is being made, what corporate business is doing, what your church has in its hands, most importantly,
Yes.
leads then to calling. Therefore, what is in this context, incarnationally, what is God calling your church to do
Yeah.
at this time? And we encourage churches to go through the neighbour pathway online and to do that once a year, because actually needs do change. And it may be that your church should stop doing something so it can put more resources into something else, or even start something new. But you need to actually review, like any organization reviews what it's doing, every year. And the church should be exactly the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just because we started this doesn't mean we have to continue it, throughout eternity. Actually, actually, this doesn't have to go on forever.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
there while it's needed, and when it's needed, not needed, then it needs to just be wrapped up. But sometimes
Yeah.
when we're better at starting things than closing things.
Yes. Oh, yeah,
And
definitely.
we need
Definitely.
we need to exercise our wrapping things up and calling it a day, and putting our resources elsewhere,
Yes.
a little bit more.
Yeah, that is unbelievably helpful and incredibly encouraging because actually, without knowing about your five C's, we as a church are doing just that, and it's been incredibly helpful as a journey, because one of the things it's done for us is it's made us realize that you can't put calling first. Often churches want to put, okay, what is God calling us to do? Then how do we make it happen? But what you've done is say, no, 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 you need to look, because often what happens in church is you think you've got a calling and you go out to the community and find there isn't a need. And what the heck is going on there? Whereas this puts it the right way round. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, one of the things that we've learned as a church is that there are people of peace in all contexts. People, in commerce that you can work with, people in the council that you can work with, and open doors like you couldn't possibly imagine. So to have that in there is really, really important.
Mm.
And we need to recognize the power of that.
Yeah.
So I find that really helpful. But you said that was the second. What's the first and the third?
Oh, no, there we go. I dangled the carrot. I
You
didn't realize
did.
I
You
was
did. It
actually.
worked.
So the first step is actually the neighbour survey to
Okay.
help
Yeah.
churches measure their impact.
Yes.
And this comes exactly to your point. There are many men and women of peace
Yes.
out there. They're not Christians, they're not believers, some of them are, but they're willing to work with others. And in a time of financial strain,
Yes.
people are more collaborative. When there's plenty, people just get on, do their own thing because they can
Yeah.
do whatever they want, however they want. But when resources are stretched, it actually creates a culture of partnership and collaboration.
Yeah.
So actually, there is a big advantage to being stretched, because you think, well, actually, how could we work with others? So anyway, the first step in the neighbour guided journey is to measure your existing impact. So the neighbour survey, which now any local church can go on right now, neighbour.org, and you can go and do the neighbour survey, get an immediate report on what your church is doing in the community, not just in narrative, but in numbers,
Yes.
not just in story, but in statistics. And then that data also feeds into our global dashboard about what the global church is doing.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting.
So the really important thing about the neighbour survey is it enables you as a local church to evidence that you are good news.
Yes.
We are called to be good news, but
Yeah.
actually to be able to say to the local authority, police leaders, political leaders, business leaders, yeah, here is the evidence
Yes.
of what we're already contributing and we want to do more. How
Yeah.
can we work together?
Yeah, and
So
that's
neighbour
really
survey.
good. Because one of the things that we found, we are in the middle of a 2.4 million pound building project, and we're doing it in partnership with a housing association in order to provide affordable housing for those with additional needs. That's what it's going to be. The council are going to work with us as well, and all of that partnership that has been unbelievably fruitful for us and will continue to be so, in terms of the reason why it's fruitful is not because it enables us to do things and not because it compromises what we stand for, but it draws us into the very heart of making a difference within our community, to be salt and light with the decision makers and with those that we're seeking to reach. But the thing that's been really interesting about it is the excitement with which what we as a church are doing is infecting those who are in decision-making places. It's put us in a place that we never thought possible, because we were willing to survey the need, and we were able to go to grant making bodies and to the council and say, we as a church do 7,500 hours of volunteering, whatever the time is, I can't remember. We are invested in this. We have been here for over 100 years doing this sort of stuff, and that counts enormously in terms of their understanding. You're talking their language. That's really important, Matt, and it's really helpful to know there's a resource out there to help you do that.
Yeah. So the neighbour survey helps churches measure their impact.
Yes.
So
Very
that you
good.
can demonstrate that faith is a force for good.
Yes.
And your church is good news in the community.
Yes.
And every other body, organization, institution who is also committed to the good of community, you would love to work with them, because you're working for the same thing. I love what the prophet Jeremiah said, to the God's people, seek the peace and prosperity of the city. So seek the tranquility and the well-being and the financial health of the place where you live. And this is what every church, every community of believers is called to do in every location
absolutely.
around the world.
And it's amazing, isn't it? Because the other thing that happens when you do the survey is it's amazing how many churches don't know the influence they're already having.
Yeah.
And that is a revelation to them. They are absolutely amazed because they just thought they were doing what they do. Really interesting. Okay, third feature. Come on, bring this home for me. Bring this home, Matt.
Step one, neighbour survey. Measure the impact of what you're doing. Celebrate that. Communicate it to others. Step two, the neighbour pathway. Go through a journey of discerning what are the needs of your community and what is Jesus calling you to do. Step three is the neighbour menu. In the neighbour menu, you've got stories and projects that churches are delivering in communities around the world to serve and love their neighbours. And so the neighbour menu, it gives you access to inspiration and examples. And sometimes you'll read it and think, oh, we could do that, or we should do something like that, and off you go. Others will say, oh, we want to do that, we can adapt it locally. Let's get the playbook, let's get the manual, let's go and get trained to deliver this, and they'll do it. So different churches respond in different ways, but it's either the spark of inspiration or the help and the advice and the training you can get to do something similar in your context. So that's the neighbour menu, and there are dozens of stories from all around the world of what churches. One of my favourites is in Australia. I love Australia. It's showing it's such a long way away from London, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like many countries, there's an issue of domestic violence, and the police get a call every 3 minutes about a domestic violence issue. One woman a week, and it is women, is killed on average, one a week. Not by a stranger, but by a partner or former partner. That's very, very sobering, shocking. But there's a great church in Brisbane, in Queensland, Australia, who decided to address the root cause of what was going on in homes. And it's great, all the work going on to support victims of domestic violence, amazing. But this church said, let's go upstream. And so they launched something called Circuit Breaker. And it basically invites people, men and women, who feel their anger is beginning to damage their relationships, to join a group where they're able to work through how they manage their emotions and their behavior and their reaction. And this project, Circuit Breaker, has been replicated now in churches across Australia. And for me, it's best in class. I've never seen anything anywhere in the world run by a church in its local community to actually deal with the root causes of domestic violence. And so the neighbour menu includes stories like this. And even me telling this story now here, somebody may be listening and thinking, oh, that is the need we want to address in our community.
Yeah.
So reach out to us and we
Yes.
will connect you, and they'll share more of their story, their videos, their training, and you can perhaps run this in your church for your community.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've just written it down.
There we go.
And that was just the one story. And you think,
I thought you were writing your shopping list, Richard.
no. I'm thinking, do you know, we're having a conversation with a member of our congregation about domestic violence, FGM, and those sorts of things. We've got a member of our congregation that is actually just trained in counselling, and is wanting to engage with domestic violence. And that you should pick that illustration this morning. I'm going to have a look at that and see whether that translates into our community and our situation, and to people who are passionate about wanting to do something in that area. Yeah, brilliant. So, and actually, it's going to make me go to the website and have a look. And just talking about that as we sort of begin to wind this up, and I'm so grateful for your time. I noticed a couple of weeks ago that you are going fully online with NAYBA. And I find that really interesting, because right at the beginning we were talking about the church engaged eyeball to eyeball with its community, meeting the needs, etc. And yet here you are, NAYBA, the organization, going fully online. Come on, tell me, there's a disconnect here for me. So tell me how that works and why.
Well, you have to remember, NAYBA is a facilitator,
Yes.
a catalyst.
Yes.
We do not run any programs to help people in need. We love God's church, and we encourage God's church, support God's church, resource God's church, inspire God's church to do the delivery. So, and that's always been my vision, but to do that globally. Now, over the last couple of years, I realized that the strategy we were following to do all that for and with local churches, it was just, we were going to never get to grow global reach. It was just, we couldn't raise money fast enough to have enough people to talk to every church. It just can't happen.
Yeah.
And also, so we didn't have the reach, and we didn't have a means of paying for it.
Yes.
So what can you do? Well, what incredible organizations, businesses, and others are doing around the world to extend reach and create sustainability is they go digital.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's what NAYBA has done. So that's why the NAYBA guided pathway I described, of the NAYBA survey to measure your impact, the NAYBA pathway to discern what's next, and the NAYBA menu to share more love. Those 3 steps are now all available online. We've stripped NAYBA back, and that is what we do, those 3 things. And that whole journey is a guided journey that your church can go online and access now. Fantastic. And that, by going digital first. Now, of course, we're still out there pressing the flesh, Richard.
Yeah, of course you are.
I meet with lots of church leaders, speak at lots of events, and encourage lots of leaders, and so do my colleagues. But actually, to be able to say to them, actually, you don't need to wait for us and our schedule to match with your schedule. You can go online now and you can start this journey, and we will guide you through it. Now, what that does is it gives us global reach immediately.
Yes.
And it creates global sustainability and global impact.
Yeah.
So for us, in becoming a digital first charity, by which I mean our key services are all accessible online, it's actually transformative for the scope and the potential of what we are doing worldwide, and what Jesus has called us to do for his bride, for the church he loves.
Fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. And I'm really glad the resource is there, and I'm really glad it's a resource that isn't so tailored to the West that it won't work in other contexts. Because actually, as you say, because it's facilitating, it's not actually it's doing the global thing, isn't it? We can globally offer you a facilitation process that enables you to be rooted more locally than you have been to date, and that's really helpful. That's really helpful. Hey, mate, thank you so much. Some people may think that this is a NAYBA advert, but actually, when something's good, it's worth promoting. It's worth raising the profile of. And in lots of ways, I think we've been pressing the flesh, even though it's been virtually today. And for that, I'm really grateful. Really grateful. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And however, my passing, however you do it, and whoever you work with to do it.
Yes. Do it.
Do it. Love your
absolutely.
neighbour. And if you want to know more, you can go to our website, neighbour, NAYBA.org, or you can get this little book, Every Neighbour Loved. It's available on Amazon, and it will introduce you and lead you through the neighbour journey.
Fantastic. And I will stick the details in the comments section below so you can actually, connect with that if that's something that's going to be absolutely helpful to you. Thank you so much, Matt. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your enthusiasm, and thanks for the clarity, because sometimes this can become quite confusing to people. So you have been so clear this morning, and I really appreciate that.
A pleasure. Thank you, Richard.